The morning light of Kepler 442b filtered through the bioluminescent panels of Nexus University's Advanced Biology Department, casting ethereal shadows across the amphitheater. Zara Kethnor adjusted her data tablet with slender fingers, her silver skin catching the light as delicate blue markings along her temples pulsed gently with her heartbeat. As one of only 12 Velian students at the prestigious Interstellar University, she had grown accustomed to being an oddity among the diverse student body, but today's seminar promised to make her feel even more out of place. Comparative reproductive biology across sentient species, she murmured to herself, reading the course title on her tablet. Her violet eyes swept across the lecture hall, taking in the fascinating array of beings that had gathered. There were the towering centaurians with their bark-like skin, the graceful Andorians whose hair moved like liquid mercury, and scattered among them, the humans. Zara found herself studying the humans with particular interest. They were such an enigmatic species, having only joined the Galactic Consortium 3 years ago, yet they had already proven themselves remarkably adaptable. Their homeworld of Earth was considered a backwater planet by most standards, but their rapid technological advancement and voracious curiosity had earned them respect throughout the galaxy. Still, there was something about them that puzzled her scientific mind. The lecture hall fell silent as Professor Quintar entered, his scaled form moving with the fluid grace typical of his draconian heritage. His ancient eyes, which had witnessed the birth and death of stars, surveyed the room with approval. "Welcome, young scholars," his voice resonated through the hall, "to what I consider the most fascinating subject in all of xenobiology, the diverse approaches to reproduction across our galaxy's sentient species." Zara leaned forward, her interest piqued. As a xenobiologist specializing in comparative physiology, she thought she understood the basics of most species' reproductive patterns. Her own people, the Velians, had a complex 37-day cycle tied to the lunar phases of their homeworld. It was elegant, predictable, and allowed for careful family planning that had served their civilization for millennia. Today, Professor Quintar continued, his forked tongue tasting the air, we shall examine some of the more unusual reproductive strategies that have evolved. Let us begin with a species that has recently joined our academic community. He gestured toward the cluster of human students. Humans present us with a fascinating biological paradox. A three-dimensional hologram materialized above the lecture podium, showing the internal anatomy of a human male. Zara felt her cheeks warm as she studied the display, her scientific curiosity overriding her natural modesty. The human form was so different from her own people's more angular physiology. Now, Professor Quintar began, his voice taking on the tone of someone about to reveal a great secret. Most of you will be familiar with the concept of breeding cycles. Velians have their lunar synchronized cycles, Centaurians mate once every 7 years, Andorians have their seasonal heat, and so forth. These cycles serve important evolutionary purposes. They conserve energy, ensure offspring are born at optimal times, and prevent the dangerous obsession with mating that could distract from survival. Zara nodded along, this was basic biology. She glanced around the room and noticed other students doing the same. However, the professor continued, his voice dropping to an almost conspiratorial whisper, humans have no such cycle. The statement hung in the air like a physical presence. Zara felt her stomach drop as if she had just entered zero gravity. Around her, she could hear the sharp intake of breath from various species, the rustling of wings, and the clicking of mandibles. "I beg your pardon, Professor," called out Vex High, a Centaurian student whose voice carried the deep resonance of his species. "Did you say they have no breeding cycle?" Professor Quintar's expression grew almost amused. "Indeed. Humans, particularly human males, are biologically capable of mating at any time, in any season, regardless of external conditions. They experience what we might call continuous fertility." Zara's data tablet slipped from her suddenly nerveless fingers, clattering to the floor. The sound seemed to echo through the stunned silence of the lecture hall. Continuous fertility. The concept was so alien to her understanding of biology that her mind struggled to process it. "But Professor," interjected Silantha, an Andorian whose mercury hair had turned a shocked silver, "how do they function in society?" How do they accomplish anything if they're constantly driven by mating urges? The professor's scaled lips curved into what might have been a smile. An excellent question. You see, humans have developed remarkable psychological control mechanisms. They can suppress or redirect these urges through what they call willpower and social conditioning. This constant biological drive is actually theorized to be one of the factors behind their species' rapid expansion and adaptability. Zara retrieved her tablet with shaking hands, her mind reeling. She looked across the lecture hall at the human students, seeing them with completely new eyes. They sat there so casually, as if this revelation meant nothing to them, as if being in a constant state of biological readiness was the most natural thing in the world. One of them, a tall male with dark hair and warm brown eyes, seemed to sense her stare. He turned slightly and caught her gaze, offering a friendly smile that made her heart race for reasons she couldn't quite understand. The casual way he smiled, the easy confidence in his posture, was this all a result of their unique biology? This continuous fertility, Professor Quintar continued, seemingly oblivious to the minor crisis of understanding occurring in his audience, combined with their emotional complexity, has created a species that bonds through physical intimacy rather than despite it. They use mating not just for reproduction, but for emotional connection, stress relief, and social bonding. Zara's mind struggled to wrap around this concept. Her own people approached mating with the serious reverence due to any important biological function. It was scheduled, planned, and occurred with the appropriate ceremony and preparation. The idea that humans could be intimate spontaneously, driven by emotion rather than biological necessity, was both shocking and strangely fascinating. Now, the professor said, clearly enjoying the effect his words were having on the class, let us examine the psychological implications of this unique reproductive strategy. But Zara found herself unable to focus on the rest of the lecture. Her mind kept returning to that human male's smile, to the casual way he had looked at her. Did he know what she was thinking? Could he sense her confusion and newfound curiosity about his species? As the lecture drew to a close, Zara realized that her carefully ordered understanding of biology, society, and relationships had been fundamentally shaken. She had come to this seminar expecting to learn about alien reproduction in an academic sense. Instead, she found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about the nature of desire, connection, and what it meant to be a sentient being in this vast galaxy. The human male was still looking at her occasionally, and each time their eyes met, she felt a strange flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with her usual clinical interest in xenobiology. Something had awakened in her, something that her people's structured approach to relationships had never prepared her for. As the students began to file out of the lecture hall, Zara remained seated, staring at her notes without really seeing them. The world had suddenly become a much more complicated and fascinating place, and she wasn't sure she was ready for the implications of what she had learned. But ready or not, her scientific curiosity had been thoroughly aroused, and Zara Kethnor had never been one to leave a compelling mystery unsolved. 3 days had passed since Professor Quintar's revelation, and Zara found herself unable to concentrate on anything else. Her usually pristine laboratory workspace was cluttered with research tablets displaying everything she could find about human biology, psychology, and social structures. The blue markings along her temples had been pulsing more rapidly than usual, betraying her heightened emotional state to anyone familiar with Velian physiology. She had always prided herself on her logical, methodical approach to xenobiology, but now she felt like a first-year student encountering her first alien species. Every piece of information she discovered about humans only deepened the mystery. They formed pair bonds that could last decades, yet their continuous fertility meant they could theoretically mate with multiple partners. They experienced something called love that seemed to transcend mere biological compatibility. It was all so wonderfully, frustratingly complex. The soft chime of her communication device interrupted her thoughts. A message from her research advisor reminded her that she needed to submit her proposal for her independent study project by the end of the week. Zara stared at the message, then at her scattered research on human biology, and made a decision that would have shocked her cautious, methodical past self. She was going to study human mating behavior firsthand. The university's central cafeteria was a marvel of interspecies accommodation, with atmospheric controls that could adjust to the needs of dozens of different life forms. Specialized food synthesizers created meals appropriate for various digestive systems, while carefully designed seating areas allowed creatures of vastly different sizes and anatomies to dine together comfortably. Zara had spent the better part of the morning observing the human students from across the vast dining hall, her tablet disguised as casual reading material. She had identified several candidates for her research, but her attention kept returning to the same individual from the lecture hall. Marcus Chinvalkov, according to the student directory she had discreetly accessed. A third-year Xenocultural Relations major from the North American Federation on Earth. He was sitting with a group of other humans, their conversation animated and punctuated by frequent laughter. Zara noted how tactile they were with each other, casual touches on shoulders and arms, friendly nudges, brief contact that her own people would reserve for family members or bonded partners. Was this another manifestation of their unique reproductive biology, or simply cultural behavior? She was so absorbed in her observations that she didn't notice when Marcus separated from his group and began walking in her direction. It wasn't until a shadow fell across her tablet that she looked up to find him standing beside her table, a bemused smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. "I noticed you've been conducting some pretty intense surveillance over here." Zara's skin flushed a deeper silver, her markings pulsing frantically. She had been caught in the act, and her carefully planned approach to initiating contact had crumbled before it even began. I was merely. She stammered, her usual eloquence deserting her entirely. Marcus settled into the chair without waiting for permission, his movements casual and confident in a way that both fascinated and unnerved her. "Let me guess," he said, his warm brown eyes twinkling with amusement. "You were in Professor Quintar's lecture the other day. The one about reproductive biology." "Yes," Zara managed, grateful for the direct question that allowed her to regain some composure. "I found the information illuminating." "I bet you did." Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying her with frank curiosity. "You're Velian, right? I've read about your species' lunar cycles. Must have been quite a shock to learn that we humans don't have anything like that." The casual way he discussed such intimate biological functions made Zara's chest tighten with an unfamiliar sensation. On Velia, such topics were discussed only in clinical settings or between bonded partners. Yet here was this human, speaking about it as naturally as he might discuss the weather. It was unexpected, she admitted carefully. "Your species presents some fascinating biological paradoxes that challenge conventional xenobiological theory." Marcus laughed, a rich sound that seemed to resonate through her bones. "Is that your scientific way of saying we're weird?" "Not weird," Zara protested, perhaps more quickly than she intended. "Unique. Unprecedented. Your continuous fertility combined with your capacity for long-term emotional bonding creates a reproductive strategy unlike anything else in the known galaxy." "Continuous fertility?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Is that what the professor called it? Makes us sound like we're in heat all the time." Zara's markings flared brighter. "Aren't you?" The question hung between them for a moment before Marcus burst into laughter again. "Oh, you really don't understand humans at all, do you?" He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Look, just because we can doesn't mean we're constantly thinking about it. We have self-control, priorities, interests beyond reproduction. We're not slaves to our biology. But how do you choose when to engage in reproductive behavior?" Zara asked, her scientific curiosity overcoming her embarrassment. "Without biological cues to guide you, how do you know when it's appropriate?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, his expression growing more thoughtful. "It's not about reproduction most of the time," he said finally. "For humans, physical intimacy is about connection, about expressing feelings that are too big for words. We choose to be intimate when we feel close to someone, when we want to show them how much they mean to us. The concept was so foreign to Zara's ordered understanding of biology that she felt slightly dizzy. You mate for emotional reasons. We make love for emotional reasons, Marcus corrected gently. There's a difference. Mating is what animals do. Making love is what humans do when they care about each other. Zara's tablet slipped from her suddenly nerveless fingers for the second time in 3 days. Making love. The phrase implied a level of emotional complexity that her people had never associated with physical intimacy. On Valia, bonded partners might develop deep affection over time, but the initial pairing was based on genetic compatibility and social standing, with emotional attachment being a pleasant but secondary consideration. I can see I've given you a lot to think about, Marcus said, his voice gentler now. Can I ask why you're so interested in human reproductive behavior? Is this for a research project? Zara hesitated. She had planned to approach this as a purely academic inquiry, but something about Marcus's directness and warmth made her want to be honest. Yes, but it's more than that. Your species challenges everything I thought I understood about the relationship between biology and behavior. I want to understand how you can function as a civilization when your biology seems designed to create chaos. Chaos? Marcus looked genuinely puzzled. Constant fertility, emotional bonding, physical intimacy for non-reproductive purposes. Zara ticked off the points on her fingers. It should create unstable social structures, jealousy, conflict over mates. Yet human civilization appears remarkably stable and cooperative. Marcus nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. You're trying to figure out how we make it work. Exactly. Zara felt a surge of relief that he understood her scientific interest. Well, Marcus said, standing up from his chair, if you really want to understand human behavior, you can't do it from across a cafeteria. How about I show you around the Human Cultural Center tonight? We're having a social gathering, nothing formal, just students getting together to talk, share food, maybe some music. You could observe our social interactions in a natural setting. Zara's heart rate accelerated. The invitation was exactly what she needed for her research, but something about the way Marcus was looking at her suggested this was more than just academic cooperation. That would be scientifically valuable, she said carefully. Great. Marcus smiled, and Zara felt that strange flutter in her chest again. Meet me at the Cultural Center at 1900 hours. And Zara? He paused, having somehow learned her name without her telling him. Try not to bring your tablet. Sometimes the best way to understand a species is just to experience them. As he walked away, Zara sat frozen in her chair, her mind racing. She had achieved her goal of making contact with a human subject for her research, but something about the encounter felt different from any academic interaction she had ever experienced. The way Marcus had looked at her, the warmth in his voice when he spoke her name, the casual invitation that felt like something more significant, it all suggested that her study of human behavior might become far more personal than she had anticipated. For the first time in her life, Zara Kethnor was beginning to understand the difference between academic knowledge and experiential learning. Tonight, she would take her first step into the complex, chaotic, wonderful world of human emotion, and she had the distinct feeling that her carefully ordered life would never be the same again. The blue markings along her temples pulsed steadily as she gathered her things, and for once, she didn't mind that they were betraying her emotional state. Perhaps, she thought, there was something to be said for wearing one's feelings openly, the way humans seem to do. Perhaps there was something to be said for a little chaos after all. Zara stood before her wardrobe, paralyzed by indecision. In her 3 years at Nexus University, she had never given much thought to her appearance beyond basic hygiene and professional presentation. Velian clothing was typically functional and modest, designed to regulate body temperature and display one's academic achievements through subtle color coding. But tonight felt different. Tonight, she was venturing into human social territory, and she found herself wanting to make a good impression for reasons that had nothing to do with scientific observation. By the 7 moons of Valia, what are you doing? Came a melodic voice from behind her. Zara spun around to find her roommate and best friend, Nira Solthane, standing in the doorway. Nira's crystalline skin caught the light from the room's bioluminescent panels, fracturing it into rainbow patterns that danced across the walls. Her Altarian heritage was evident in her tall, willowy frame and the way her movements seemed to flow like liquid music. "I'm selecting appropriate attire for a cultural research expedition," Zara replied, trying to inject some scientific authority into her voice. Nira raised one perfectly sculpted eyebrow, her expression skeptical. "Research expedition? Is that what we're calling dates now?" She glided into the room, her bare feet making no sound on the smooth floor. "And why are you considering that?" She pointed to a shimmering gold garment that Zara had never worn, a gift from her mother that was far too revealing by Velian standards. "It's not a date," Zara protested, but her markings betrayed her with their rapid pulsing. "I'm studying human social behavior for my independent research project." "Aha." Nira settled herself on Zara's bed, her crystalline form creating tiny chiming sounds as she moved. "And this research subject, does he have a name?" "Marcus Chunvalkov," Zara admitted, unable to keep the warmth from her voice when she spoke his name. "He's a third-year xenocultural relations major. His reproductive biology is fascinating from a comparative perspective." Nira's laughter was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Oh, Zara. Sweet, brilliant, completely oblivious Zara. You're attracted to him." "I am not attracted to him," Zara said firmly, though her markings continued their frantic pulsing. "I am scientifically interested in his species' unique reproductive adaptations." "Right." Nira stood and moved to the wardrobe, selecting a deep blue garment that would complement Zara's silver skin without being too revealing. "Wear this. It brings out your markings without making you look like you're trying too hard." She paused, her expression growing more serious. "But Zara, be careful. Humans are intense. Their emotions run deep and hot, and they don't always understand the boundaries other species maintain." Zara took the garment, grateful for her friend's fashion sense but troubled by her warning. "What do you mean?" "I've had some experience with humans," Nira said, her crystalline skin shifting to a more muted tone. "They don't compartmentalize the way we do. When they feel something, they feel it with their whole being. It can be overwhelming if you're not prepared for it." "You've been with a human?" Zara asked, surprised. Nira had never mentioned this before. "Briefly. Last year." Nira's expression grew distant. "His name was David. He was wonderful and terrible at the same time. The way he looked at me, like I was the only thing in the universe that mattered. It was intoxicating and terrifying." "What happened?" "I got scared," Nira admitted. "The intensity of his feelings, the way he wanted to share everything with me, his thoughts, his dreams, his body. It was too much. I ended things before they could get more complicated." Zara felt a chill run down her spine. "Do you regret it?" Nira was quiet for a long moment. "Sometimes. David taught me that there are different ways to connect with another being. But I also learned that some connections can change you in ways you never expected." She fixed Zara with a steady gaze. "Just promise me you'll be careful. Don't lose yourself in the research." An hour later, Zara found herself standing outside the Human Cultural Center, her heart racing with anticipation and nerves. The building was unlike anything else on campus, where most structures were designed with clean lines and functional beauty. The Human Center felt warm and organic, with curved walls and soft lighting that reminded her of the bioluminescent forests of her homeworld. Marcus was waiting for her outside, and Zara felt her breath catch when she saw him. He had changed from his casual day clothes into something more formal, dark pants and a shirt that emphasized his broad shoulders and lean frame. When he smiled at her, that strange flutter in her chest returned with renewed intensity. "You look beautiful," he said simply, and Zara felt her markings pulse with pleased surprise. Humans were so direct with their compliments, so unafraid to express their thoughts. "Thank you," she managed. "You look aesthetically pleasing as well." Marcus chuckled, offering her his arm. Come on, let me introduce you to some friends. The interior of the cultural center was a revelation. Soft music played in the background, something Marcus identified as jazz, while humans moved through the space with casual grace. They clustered in small groups, talking and laughing, sharing food and drink, touching each other with an ease that both fascinated and unnerved Zara. Everyone, Marcus called out as they entered, I'd like you to meet Zara. She's studying xenobiology and has some questions about human social behavior. A woman with short dark hair and kind eyes approached them. I'm Jennifer, she said, offering her hand in the human gesture of greeting. Are you the one who's been researching our continuous fertility? She made air quotes with her fingers, her expression amused. Zara felt her skin flush. Word travels fast in the human community. Oh, Marcus couldn't stop talking about your conversation, said a tall man with red hair who introduced himself as Patrick. He was quite impressed by your scientific approach. It's refreshing, added Jennifer. Most species either find us fascinating or disturbing. You're the first one who's tried to understand us academically. As the evening progressed, Zara found herself drawn into conversations that challenged everything she thought she knew about sentient behavior. The humans spoke openly about their relationships, their fears, their dreams. They shared personal stories with strangers, offered comfort to those who seemed sad, and celebrated each other's victories with genuine joy. It's like they're all emotionally bonded to each other, Zara murmured to Marcus during a quiet moment. In a way, we are, Marcus replied. Humans are social creatures. We need connection, community. We don't do well in isolation. But how do you maintain individual identity in such an interconnected social structure? Marcus considered this seriously. I think our individuality is actually strengthened by our connections. When you know you're loved and accepted, you're free to be yourself. You don't have to hide parts of who you are. Zara watched as Jennifer comforted a young man who was clearly upset about something, her touch gentle and reassuring. On Valia, such intimate comfort would only be offered by family members or bonded partners. Here, it's offered by anyone who cares, Marcus said. Caring isn't limited by biological relationships. As the evening wound down, Marcus walked Zara back to her dormitory. The campus was quiet under the light of 3 moons, and Zara found herself reluctant for the night to end. Thank you, she said as they reached her building. Tonight was illuminating. I'm glad. Marcus paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Zara, can I ask you something? What are you really looking for in this research? The question caught her off guard. I want to understand how humans function as a society despite your biological complications. No, Marcus said gently. I mean, what are you really looking for? Because from where I'm standing, it seems like you're trying to understand something about yourself as much as about us. Zara felt exposed, as if Marcus could see through her careful scientific facade to the confusion and longing beneath. I don't know what you mean. I think you do. Marcus stepped closer, and Zara caught his scent, something warm and distinctly human that made her pulse quicken. I think you're wondering what it would be like to feel the way humans feel. To love the way humans love. The words hung between them like a challenge. Zara wanted to deny it, to retreat into her scientific objectivity, but something about Marcus's gentle certainty made her walls crumble. Maybe, she whispered. Marcus reached out and gently touched her face, his fingers tracing one of her luminescent markings. There's only one way to find out. Before Zara could respond, he leaned down and kissed her. It was soft and tentative, nothing like the passionate embraces she had observed earlier in the evening, but it sent shockwaves through her entire being. This was what Nira had meant about intensity, not just physical sensation, but emotional connection that seemed to bypass her rational mind entirely. When they broke apart, Zara was trembling. I need to think about this. Of course, Marcus said, his voice understanding. Take all the time you need. But Zara? Stop thinking of this as research. What's happening between us is real, and it deserves to be treated as such. As Zara made her way back to her room, her mind was spinning. She found Nira waiting for her, concern evident in the worried crystalline patterns dancing across her skin. "How did it go?" Nira asked. "He kissed me," Zara said, sinking onto her bed. And I think I'm in trouble," Zara admitted. "I came here tonight to study human social behavior, but I ended up feeling things I've never felt before. Marcus is right, this isn't research anymore. It's something else entirely." Nira sat beside her, offering comfort in the Altarian way by harmonizing her crystalline resonance with Zara's emotional frequency. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," Zara said honestly. "I've spent my whole life believing that logic and reason should govern behavior. But tonight, I felt something that transcended rational thought. I felt human." "Maybe that's not such a bad thing," Nira suggested gently. "Maybe there's room in the universe for both scientific understanding and emotional truth." Zara looked out her window at the stars, wondering if somewhere among them was the answer to her dilemma. She had set out to understand humans, but instead, she was discovering parts of herself she never knew existed. The question now was whether she was brave enough to explore this new territory, even if it meant abandoning the safety of her academic objectivity. The blue markings along her temples pulsed steadily in the darkness, and for the first time, Zara didn't try to control them. Perhaps, she thought, it was time to stop analyzing her feelings and start experiencing them. The universe, it seemed, still had many lessons to teach her.